Ah, hello, people of YouTube and the podcast sphere. Welcome to Spectator Diff, an esports podcast with probably the two most underpaid spectators in Overwatch. My name is Brad. Matt is over in that box. And we've decided to start a podcast to break down professional Overwatch matches because we have opinions and gosh darn it, somebody needs to hear them. We'll be here each week on Monday around 12:30 Eastern, or in today's case, Pacific time, to discuss the happenings of Overwatch esports. We'll cover any major headlines, break down the match of the week, and hit you with some predictions for next week. And then we'll get the hell out of here because we have lives and jobs and things to do. You can catch all of our stuff live here when we record it, and then you can also download it on your podcast consumption app of choice. You can also watch Spotify live streams now, so like the video will be over there too. So that's pretty cool. So go do all of the social media things. Leave us a like, subscribe to the channel, please. It's free to you, free to us, helps us out a ton. Leave a comment. Maybe we'll read some on the live stream. Maybe we won't. Who knows? We'll interact as best we can, and then yeah. But we're gonna do some news here and just get right on rolling. So Matt, hit us with some headlines.
Yeah, man. So honestly, not much happened this week, but it is nice to have a week of headlines that don't involve thousands of roster changes. I appreciate that. There's one roster change this week. There was a trade between the Houston Outlaws and the Seoul Dynasty. Flex support Iris got sent to the Dynasty, and Creative coming to NA and heading to Houston. So this is obviously on the back of the Houston Outlaws picking up Doge and Lep. If there is one thing I feel like I can say about the Houston Outlaws, it's that when they said, we're doing the rest of this season with an 8-man roster, they lied. Because they keep dropping people, but, you know, this one probably went through and was approved before the trade deadline or the drop deadline, and we're just hearing about it this week. It happened, like, I think right after, or maybe right during last weekend. So, yeah, that's that. Brad, do you have any thoughts on that, or is this just another player-for-player switch?
I mean, more or less, it's just player for player at this point. It's nice that, like, Iris found a home. Oh my god, the technical side of this is going crazy. So I'm trying to fix it while this is happening. Anyway, yeah, so I think this is going to be, you know, this is pretty par for the course. It's basically, it's players going back home to the APAC side of things, which is never a bad thing. As far as like the specifics of it, did the Dynasty really need Iris? No, but I think it's a good home for Iris. Personally, creative, yeah. We've seen a little bit in the past. You know what? Again, does Houston need creative? Not necessarily. Does it? It's fine. It's all of these. I have very minimal takes on these. They're fine. Like at this point in the season, how much is it really going to change?
Right. Exactly. I mean, are we really expecting to see a lot of these players? Lep has been getting a lot of play time, or honestly, I don't remember if Lep or Doge is the support. I haven't gotten those two straight
it's
yet.
Lep.
I think Lep is the support. Lep is for Lucio. So
there you go.
Moving on, Overwatch community manager Andy Belford tweeted that there's an NDA'd creator summit happening this week where content creators will get more info about Overwatch 2 and they can start talking about it, quote, next month. Now, does that mean next month September or next month October? The world will never know. Brad, 2 questions. Will it be about the Fox support? 2, we're content creators. Why weren't we invited?
Well, as to the latter, I don't know, man. It's like my Hogwarts letter. I'm waiting in the mail. My emails I check daily. So, Blizzard, if you're watching this, hey, hit us up. We got nothing going on.
Yeah, man. I'll sell out.
Yeah, right. I'll sell out for like a Klondike bar at this point. Wow, that text is so small. But anyway, yeah. But as to the former, will it be about the Fox support? Most likely. It's gonna be next month. It will be September. They'd be foolish to try and wait until the game releases, to do a secret creator sort of deal, because they need desperately there to be some publicity going into Overwatch 2, and right now the league's not going to do it, because the league numbers, the viewer rate is dropping, so naturally we made the podcast about it. Like the viewer rate's dropping. The pros are annoyed at the current meta. Like there's a lot of bad circulating press, and they just need a boost. Like the event this past month has been okay to bring people back to the game. I've had a decent time in the games that I've played, but ultimately, like that's just not enough right now. And you know, we know that content creators are not exactly Blizzard's priority. That's never been the case. We're starting to see a little bit of a shift towards change in that respect, but they are so secretive. They are so closed doors when it comes to letting anybody into how the sausage is made, that it's just like, you know, at this point, they would have been smart to do this probably a month or two ago during the last beta. I think especially when they had announced or hinted at Foxgirl, they probably should have brought in the creators at that point to sort of prepare them. It's harder to keep secrets at that point. Things get leaked, but Blizzard's pretty good about keeping the leaks sealed off, more or less. So,
yeah, I mean, it's definitely they're in the final stretch, right? Like October 4th is the big day. October 4th is like less than 40 days away at this point.
Give it to me.
They're just doing anything to milk it across the finish line. So like I get it, you know, but I honestly never, well, okay, let me take that back. I was going to say I never understand. I do understand. It's just publicity, but I don't really get the value of these press announcements that are like, we're having an NDA conference. Like, I don't give a shit, man. Tell me the news or don't. Like, I don't care who you're telling the news to if it's not me. So shut up, Blizzard, is kind of my feeling. But, you know, I'm also happy that it's almost October 4th and I don't have to worry about content drip anymore.
They're very Willy Wonka about the whole thing, aren't they? Just, you win, Charlie.
They sure are. And it's this like whole like, come experience the Magic Mystery Tour that Blizzard has, and the information is like, hey, Overwatch 2 is launching on October 4th, but actually at 11:59:59 on October 3rd, it'll go live. You know, it's just like, there's just not a lot of value to it. But hey, you mentioned events. There is an event going on in Overwatch 1 right now, the final anniversary of Overwatch 1 ends tomorrow, if you're watching the live stream the day this goes live. Today, if you're listening to the podcast the day this comes out, or it's over if you listen to this not when it comes out. With the ending of the Remix Volume 3 anniversary event will come the final bell toll for loot boxes in Overwatch.
Pour one out.
Which will officially cease sale tomorrow, August 30th, 2022.
But how will they make money?
You know, as we get ever closer to Battle Pass hell, like, you know, it's the way modern games are going. I listened to this podcast on a recommendation from Maddie the other day that was a couple of years old. It came out in like 2017 or 2018, and it was all about loot boxes and gambling and gaming and how loot box is bad. And I was like, yeah, I know. Loot box is bad, but serotonin's so good. And I've always like hated the concept of buying loot boxes, and now that they're about to go away, I'm like, but should I buy a loot box? What will I do without my boxes? You know, as I open 25 anniversary loot boxes to all common voice lines from Christmas, I'm really happy about it.
Well, little known fact, these loot boxes in the Remix event actually have a golden ticket in about 6 of them, and that's how you get into the creator secret conference.
That's it.
So there you go.
Yeah, you have to merge your accounts to your Battle.net, and then you also have to merge your NDA with your Battle.net, and then you get to go to the conference.
There you go. And then you learn all the secrets about Foxgirl that the internet is vying for.
Exactly. All right, so we have one last headline before we move on to the game of the week. This one related directly to the Overwatch League.
Yes.
Consecutive double champions, the LA Gladiators, are almost mathematically eliminated from the Summer Showdown, which will make it the first tournament that we've had in 2022 where the Glads aren't there, the first tournament we've had in 2022 where the Glads don't win, they can still technically make it into the 8th spot. It is incredibly unlikely. I'm here to tell you that the Gladiators will likely not be at the Summer Showdown, but statistically, it is possible.
And in the incredibly unlikely event that they make it by the powers that be next week, I will put an edit in next week's video that says otherwise and makes fools of us and makes fun of us. So I'm really hoping that doesn't happen, because that means I gotta work harder. But it is incredibly statistically improbable. A lot of things have to go right and wrong, unrelated to the Gladiators playing over the next. Actually, that's not entirely true. They have to beat Atlanta at a bare minimum. But
yeah,
otherwise, like, everything else that has to fall into place is just so unbelievably improbable. There's next to no chance. So Gladiators fans, I'm sorry for you, but this one ain't your time. GG, go next.
Exactly. Yeah. GG no re. Like, this is, I have talked, I think, on the show before about Overwatch League stats and how much I appreciate the work that they do. If you don't follow owlstatsnet on Twitter or haven't been to the website owlstats.net, I very much recommend it. It's one of my favorite places. So here's the situation for the LA Sadiators. Basically, there are 6 teams that are 3-3. Glads can't, or 6 teams that have 3+ wins. I'll say it that way. 6 teams with 3+ wins. Glads can't catch any of them. London could get the 7th win, and Florida or New York could be the 8th because they both still have 2 games to play. Now, if either of those teams don't win, Glads still have a hope they can beat the other 2 and 4 teams. The long story short is that if, where is it? I had it up here. I had an abbreviation. Vamping, and we're vamping. If Florida or New York win 3 maps across the weekend, they eliminate the Gladiators. That's basically the long and short of it. Feels very unlikely.
Yeah, I mean, this has been such a strange tournament cycle. Like, the teams that are like definitively in the lead are so far in the lead by comparison to the rest of the top 8 that it's mind-boggling. This whole thing has just the whole meta has turned everything on its head at this point. And oh man, I'm ready to be done with it. I'm ready to get us that next countdown cup thing going on, and just hope that it's a little bit different, because this has been a nightmare to try and analyze.
Dude, it really has been. And speaking of a nightmare to try and analyze, Brad, would you like to move on to the game of the week?
Why not? Let's just dive right into it. We're talking about London versus the Justice, which I will start playing in the background now. Yeah, it's, this is a week that not a lot of things happened, and quite frankly, it was hard for us to pick a specific game of the week. This was a 5-banger, 2 relatively evenly matched teams with some minor differentiation in the meta, more than we've seen, at least for the most part, in the league this tournament cycle so far.
Hey, watch how quick Assassin dies here.
Right? Like, oh, jeez. I've talked a lot of crap about Backbone and his Genji over the past couple of weeks. Not so much on the podcast, on the air, but in the background, because I don't think it is his strongest hero by any means. And in a lot of ways, I think some of the shortcomings with the Spitfire this cycle have been because, incidentally, of Backbone's hero choices and his hero pool. He's competent by all means, and he does have pop-off moments, but generally speaking, like, this just does not suit their DPS particularly well. And I mean, Sparker's a decent enough hit scan player, but he cannot quite make up the difference for Backbone's Genji and some of the shortcomings there.
Yeah, I cut you off to talk about Assassin dying, but what you were saying, I mean, I totally agree with. Like, this was a relatively lackluster weekend, not a ton went on. I really think that this game was one of the more entertaining games to watch. I mean, it hurts for London. Obviously, like, as a Washington fan, I was happy to see them get the win. I have some feelings about Washington getting this win. I don't really think that they deserved it. I think London dropped their spaghetti, but it was a good game to watch. Teams played well. I enjoyed it. I will say there were some obvious moments in this game that we were not watching the top 6 teams in the bracket. You know, like, there are a number of moments in this game where, and one of them is either coming up or I don't know what time we're at, or it's coming up like a minute away from where we are in the video now. London picks 2, and then Washington picks 3, and then somehow London caps the point back. And that happens largely because Kalios and Hottie rampage, and between both of them, only one person gets hit by a rampage. It's not a great look.
It's just funny to me. This entire meta has been hilarious to me because either at this point, either you're dominating or you're getting dominated, and the handful of teams that are just kind of in the middle of this top 8 pick are so similar. Here's the moment you were talking about, as it turns out.
Yeah. Hottie trying to hide behind that tree like an idiot.
But it's just like, what's funny is how evenly matched I think the bottom side of the top 8 are, because they haven't quite grasped how closely you have to play together as a team, and kind of, it's not nearly as clean of a play style as we've seen from like the Shock or occasionally from Dallas. I have different thoughts about Dallas from this weekend, but we'll get to that later in the episode. But it's just like you just don't see the same coordination. It's partially the reason that the Gladiators got eliminated so early, because they're slow starters to begin with, and they had a hard schedule. I'm leaving from our game of the week, unfortunately, but the point is still there. These two, London and Washington, are very evenly matched teams in the current meta, and it's just like, which way is the wind blowing that determines who's really winning at any given time.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a big part of the reason that I'm tired of this meta, because something that I enjoy about watching Overwatch compared to a lot of other esports is the versatility that teams have. You know, I don't enjoy it when we're deadlocked on one meta. We've got 100% pick rate on Junker Queen, 100% pick rate on Sojourn, 100% pick rate on Lucio. Like, that's not fun for me.
Yeah.
I like watching teams be able to problem solve around their weaknesses. And you know, London picks up this first round, moving into the second round, and they send Backbone out on the May, which we're going to talk about, but not on this map. We're going to talk about it on map 3 because that's important. But, you know, like, there's this little tiny bit of variation from London, and that's why I enjoy watching them play. But as a whole, I'm just bored of watching boulders run at each other.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
And it's just one of those things. Like, again, it's very hard to analyze from what we have available to us. It feels like we're recycling talking points every single week, because it's the same thing happening over and over and over again. Oh, they shouted at each other. Oh, who shouted first? Oh, cool, they lose. Oh, that Lucio beat was off by 3 seconds. They lose. It's just the same. It's the same thing over and over and over again. And it's like, It is predictable at this point, because now the teams are sort of shaking themselves out. They're starting to really show us kind of where they sit with this meta. So it's now no longer the upset fest we had towards the beginning of the stage, but now we're settled into the same thing. It's like, oh, Washington and London are going at it. They're pretty evenly matched. This could go either way. I guess, you know, who's gonna throw hardest today? Like, it's. Which sounds harsh, but like, that's just kind of the reality of it, because certain off picks in this meta especially can go exactly one of two ways, and it's either going to work or you are going to lose, period. And so now that we're seeing the mate, like, it's great to see some variation. But like, is it the solution? Is it the thing that makes us perk up our ears and go, oh, this is gonna work. I like this. You know, it's just on loop. I am repeating myself week after week after week.
No, it's true. Actually, Connor said in the chat, he said, I kept hearing Brad in my ear saying, it's hard to pinpoint what went wrong in this fight because it's just so minute, and just how true that is. Like, it is exactly like, all right, they shouted first, they beat first, they rallied first, they hit Blade first. All right, whatever team hits that second is going to win the fight because they're going to last longer. And there were a couple of fights in this match that came down to, like, oh, well, both teams used both support ultimates and shout, and Washington did all three a little earlier than London did. Or London did all three a little earlier than Washington did. And, you know, I said, like, as a Washington fan, I should be really happy about this win, and I'm not. And it's for two reasons. One is that London had no business losing this game. London choked harder on map 3 of this series than I have seen a team choke all year. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And London should have won this game, and they fucked it up so bad in map 3 they didn't deserve to. And you know what? Washington almost gave it to them anyway, and they still didn't win. But my other problem is that, like, in the same way that off hero picks or, you know, cycling ultimates or those sorts of things have so much determination on who wins these fights, so much of it comes down to what Sojourn hits a headshot first.
Oh, yeah.
And when you have Decay on Sojourn, he's almost always going to hit the headshot first, at least against a team like London. And so you get into this point again, which is a constant problem for Washington, that if Decay is hot, they do great. And if Decay is not hot, they look like trash. And I think that Decay both was hot and Washington looked like trash in this game. There you go.
Well, I'll touch upon this more later in this game, but like it's like you said, you know, the Sojourn diff is very real in this meta, and it's part of the reason why I'm not so hot on the Mei pick in general. Like, it is so unbelievably like risky of a choice and you can't play it into teams with a solid Sojourn player. You can't, because the wall is something for the Sojourn to charge off of, and if any like opportunity that you can give a Sojourn to get a free full powered headshot or even a full powered body shot is enough to deal enough damage to like focus fire a squishy and get that crucial first pick. Like, especially with enemy Genjis in the meta, like if your opponents are playing Genji Sojourn into you, like, you are giving them ample opportunity to just dive your backline for free. You give them the charge and the follow-up pretty much uncontested. You know, at that point, positioning matters so much more, and it's just such a risky play, which is why, like, right now you're seeing Backbone switch back over from the Mei, because it's just, like, it works until it doesn't. And you know, we said that over the weekend. It works until it doesn't, and when it doesn't, it really doesn't. And
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Decay said in his post-game interview, he was like, we were really confused about the Mei. We didn't know how to handle the Mei. And I think that shows. Yeah. You know, I think as you get deeper into the maps, Washington gets more used to playing against Mei and figures it out. I mean, the first 3 maps of this game, really, Decay barely shoots the Mei wall. Like,
right.
I don't know if he doesn't know if it charges the rail or if it's just not a priority for him. But, like, last phase, we saw a lot of Sojourns, like, oh, a shield popped up, I'm going to run that shield down to charge my rail.
Yeah.
And in these first couple of maps, you don't see Decay focusing that rail charge quite so much because you can tell they're just confused. And post map 3, that's when it really starts to click of like, hey, Mei counters Junker Queen really well, but Sojourn counters Mei really well.
Right.
So.
And the other thing is, like, I do, to Backbone's credit, he uses his walls a lot more strategically, a lot more creatively. And at that point, what ends up happening, like, his walls don't stay up for very long. Not because they're getting shot at, but because he takes them down himself. He uses them for cutoff plays quickly to, like, mess up rotations and things like that, which is a really, really good strategy. But at the other side of that is it doesn't, it's not as easy for the Sojourn to charge off of because it's just not there as long. And also you have to be in line of sight and whatnot. And Decay isn't always in position to really capitalize on that. And so that is obviously the counter argument to the Mei pick. There are advantages in how you use the Mei, and the Mei player themselves matters. So, obviously it can work. Obviously it can create some confusion. It's an either way sort of situation. I think it's a bigger risk going into teams that have the better Sojourn and the follow-up damage. I think it's a big risk there, but in a team matchup like this where it's fairly even, fine. Take your chances.
So I see that you just rolled up map 2, and
Yes.
I'm not gonna lie to you. There's not a lot that happens in this map. Washington wins map 2. Washington finishes their first attack with 2:03 left. London finishes their first attack with 2:15. Washington pushes to B. London pushes almost to B, but not so far. It's a very run-of-the-mill map. The map that I'm really interested in talking about, and I'm cool to skip map 2 if you are,
Sure, why
is
not?
map 3.
Let's
I want to
do
talk
it.
about Gibraltar.
Let's do Gibraltar. 51.
Chat just said, bring Torb into the meta, uproot the hierarchy.
Look, I'm fine with that. I'm all fine with a Torb meta. I would love to see Torb in the league more than just as like a meme pick. Honestly, like it's, it can have the same kind of consequences as like this kind of meta, but screw it. Like, it's different. I'd take it for a day or a couple weeks. Why not? Buff him to the stratosphere. Make him a tank. I don't care.
I'll take a Torb tank. I'm into that. So here we are with Washington about to attack, and London rolls out on Froyotes. And this was pretty controversial with the casters. Matt had a lot to say about Mei on defense, and I really want to hear your thoughts on Mei on defense on Gibraltar, Brad.
I mean, in this meta, look, again, you're taking your chances. I think as far as like the defense side of it is concerned, it's all right. I don't think that this first point especially is close enough quarters to justify the Mei. I think you're kind of putting yourself at a disadvantage because you don't have the assassin first pick potential, not assassin the player, but you don't have the assassination potential that you get from the Genji, and subsequently the mobility. And there's a lot of verticality in this first point and the second point, but it's not as close quarters as the second point. So you're kind of putting yourself, that's a good Mei wall. Really, really great to disrupt the Genji there, just side note. But like, it obviously, again, depends on the player and the team's ability to play around with the Mei, but you lose a lot of the mobility, you lose a lot of the first pick potential, and you have to be super coordinated to make it work. Obviously, great use of Mei wall there to like disrupt, and as a disruption tactic, Backbone's getting away with murder here. Pretty handily managing the first two fights for the Spitfire. But like, again, all in all, high risk, potentially high reward. They're letting Assassin just get away with pushing cart past where they need to. So like, again, great Mei wall, great isolation, but they're just constantly being annoyed by Assassin, who has the mobility to just play around the Mei wall and around the team and just get away with pushing the cart around corner for free.
Yeah, and it's weird. I watched this happen, and now that they've pushed past that corner, like, you lose the benefit that you had at the beginning of the map, right? And
Right.
Washington, because it's Washington, backs out for the reset. And so you can set this up one more time, and I think that they get like one more kill off it. But basically, once they speed through here, London doesn't have anything on defense. And
Right.
like, yeah, I mean, they suck 2 minutes off the clock. That's certainly not nothing. but how many games have we seen end under the car wash on Gibraltar? You know, like for a team to make it through A, that's kind of the hard part of the map. And so if all you're doing is getting 2 minutes out, and don't get me wrong, I like this May pick. I think it's really cool. I think London, just to be frank, looks better playing the May than they do playing the Genji.
Agreed.
That doesn't necessarily mean it's the better pick. I just think they look better. And so it's the good example of it works until it works, or it works until it doesn't. And boy, once they get through car wash, does it not work?
I mean, it just all fell apart because they got out rotated. Like the second that cart rounded the corner for free, mind you, like they just had no response. They sped through the low ground and forced London off their one like true power position because they could no longer play on that bridge section, and it's just like. Now it's where the May just kind of stops really working because like it's a much faster comp that Washington are running, and they can just outmaneuver and effectively surround London like they're doing now.
Yeah, and so basically right after he gets this, or he got that Blizzard off, Backbone switches over to Genji, which is good. I mean, I think it's the right call here. And this is another one of those moments where like, obviously where we're at in the stream, there's still 2-ish minutes left, but Decay is what pushes this card across the line. It's not Washington, it's Decay. And it's not even really London playing poorly. It's just Decay popping off and deadlifting. And I think Connor said it in chat. I want to double down on it. Like letting that free push from Assassin happen to let them get around that corner for free, I think is what really does London's defense in here. They never really reset after that. You can tell that their set game plan was to hold A, and after A, and it just really kind of sucks to see them fall apart because they get another good hold here. Decay pops off, and that's it. That's that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately it just highlights kind of the biggest problem with London is that they have certain looks that work well for them, but the minute those are exploited, there's just nothing they can do. And it's unfortunate. I wish there was some more flexibility there. Obviously, they've just picked up Khan. That'll help fill in some of the gaps. But by and large, it's London is playing in a very unfortunate meta for them because there's not a lot of things that you can do to differentiate. And when they have to, pick more comfortable heroes that are different from the standard comp, it's not great for them because they are forced to be maneuvered in a certain way, and it's easy to work around, unfortunately.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think what's interesting too is that while London is dealing with that problem in Jotes, I'm interested to see if Washington deals with that problem going forward because now Washington has the smallest roster in the league. They have 5 dudes, like those 5 people and Jan from accounting are the only people on the Washington roster. So if they go into a meta that, I don't know, Tracer isn't strong, Genji isn't strong, hit scan isn't. If we get some fucking weird spam damage pharmacy meta, like what's Washington gonna do? So I do think that it will be interesting to see. I agree, London's in a bad meta for them right now, but does the next meta favor them better, favor other people worse? I think we're only a couple weeks from really finding that out.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. Oh my God. Thank the Lord. So where we're at in this game, you're about to see Decay deadlift in overtime here. And the point C push is pretty standard. There's a little battle of the blades in the mega pack room across the gap in point C. But really after Decay pulls this overclock and just does a ton of damage and lets everybody clean it up, Washington caps no problem. If you would, I would love to jump to London's attack and talk a little bit about that because London's attack looked really good.
Let's see, 101 Fitty Tree. Let's call it a nice. Oh wow, that was
nailed it. There's that blade battle I was talking about right there. Anyway, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. I mean, oh, goodness.
Watch this May diff that's about to happen. This is the most justified May on offense moment in this whole game. It's absurd. And it's such a classic, like, I'm playing May and I've screwed up and I really hope my team saves me. So Backbone gets isolated. He puts a wall up. No way they turn this. Uh-oh. Everybody's back and Landon has a rally.
That's just perfect textbook peeling at that point. I have no notes for that. It's not even, it's a May diff, definitely. Like, it's just big brain to, like, corner yourself just to give yourself the time to not get picked. But, like, really major props to just the amount of peel that he received, and even honestly, like, because of how close they were to capping the point anyway, like, the investment of that rally is more than justified to begin with. So, like, all around, just, like, great play. And now walking into this, like, with a 4 alt bank, obviously they're using the overclock right now because Sparker's just in a great position to do so. But, like, they're sitting real pretty right now with their alt economy by comparison to Washington at this point in the match, who are lagging pretty far behind.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, like, comparing attacks, Washington, by the time they got to this point in the map, was creeping into overtime. London still got almost a 4-minute time bank. Spoiler alert, they finished this map with over 4 minutes in the time bank. So it might sound kind of crazy to you when I say that Washington wins this map.
In any other meta, it would sound crazy to me, but unfortunately, like, I've seen so much spaghetti dropping, like, I could literally open a warehouse at this point. I don't know if that joke landed. Doesn't matter.
It did. It landed with me.
But
we don't have one of those right now because the roof fell through it. But
rest in pesto. But it's just like, it's amazing to me. Just, like I said, it's these mid-tier teams, right? They have so much potential, and there are moments of such brilliance, but there are equal moments of absolute head empty. What are you doing? Let's use every ultimate in the bank all at once and get nothing from it. And it's a consequence of the meta, because sometimes you invest everything and still nothing dies. Because they used one ultimate that happened to counter everything in your bank. And it's unfortunate, but it is the world we are currently living in.
Yeah, man, I am sure that somewhere in these last 3 weeks, we've seen 10 ultimates and no confirmations. Like, I'm sure that it has happened that we've seen 2 teams WQ at each other and nobody died.
That I'm gonna pause you for a second to just make a note of that particular wall. That is so genius on so many levels. Let's go at an angle where they literally can't get on either side and they have to break every single brick to get just chef's kiss, no notes, brilliant. Oh, that moments, like little things like that, just good stuff.
Yeah, man. The brain on Backbone is large. Backbone's got a big old brain on that boy. You know what they don't have, Brad, is a big old defense.
Yeah,
London does not have a big old defense. So Washington has 1 minute in the bank, right? London comes out on Froyotes, which I think is the right choice. You know, you held them for 2 minutes on point A with this comp. Why bother changing? Safe to assume you can hold them for 2 points or 2 minutes on point A again. Don't see why you wouldn't. I just kind of wanted to, like, talk about this and break this down with you, because honestly, like, even watching it, it's hard to pick out what happens.
All right, why not? Let's go. I mean, okay, so we've got the same comp. London has no reason to assume this wouldn't work again, despite the fact that, you know, they still full capped on the first attempt. Let me see. And we're vamping because the action is just now beginning with the team fight. It's again though, it's this positioning that they're forced to take because they're playing the Mei on defense. Like, they can't go anywhere else because if Mei overextends, she has no way to get anywhere else. You know, it's the problem that they don't have when you play a Genji here, because Genji can dash, Genji can climb. Mei has to use her wall, and he's, because of how aggressively Backbone is using the walls to isolate, like right there, this is where it kind of falls apart for their defense, because they're already past the choke point, and the wall doesn't cover the entirety of the car wash, so they can just, oh, there's a wall there, guess we go around it. This is a better isolation, but even still, like, I don't think, yeah, they don't secure the pick, and Decay is able to get the headshot off of onto Backbone. Because the charge is there from the wall. Decay was in the right position to capitalize on that, and that's GG, point A cap. Like,
yeah, and I mean, that opening pick Decay gets on Landon, like, can't be oversold.
right.
Obviously, that's just a Decay thing, you know? Like, who hits those headshots? Decay hits those headshots. So, and if I'm the London Spitfire, and I'm like, okay, well, they got point A, but we have almost 5 full minutes to get to point A. Like, let's just choke them down on point B. That would make a lot of sense. What I don't understand is London's hold attempt here on point B.
They just give up so much for free.
So much free progress. So much progress. They're not even fighting for spaceship. It's insane.
Oh, I don't understand. I can't really. I think that's just bad play calling at that point, because they were all bunched up in spaceship, but like they're taking no space and allowing them to get nearly around the choke point for free. And by the time they decide to commit to the fight, it's too late. The Justice are already in better position to actually get those opening picks. It's that's just unfortunate. I think that's just a miscommunication or a bad play call. I don't even think they get a recontest here. I think that's just point.
It is. And I think that that's a pretty huge mistake too, right? Like, you can see the wireframes running in and backing off. I think that somebody probably could have inted in there and gotten that cart and contested, and I wish that they would have. You know, like, the reality is that even if you lose that recontest, you're going to give up the same amount of cart progress after they cap the point that you would have waiting and then setting up your defense on top of the incline.
Oh my goodness.
So I really wish they would have gone in there to try and touch that.
Just watching this back, because I haven't seen this in a day or so now, so I forgot that they're playing so passively. It is remarkable just how much free space that Washington gets, and like they're finally after so much time, like they've built an ultimate that they can actually use, and they're in a position to capitalize on it. But that's nearly 3 points of just almost uncontested cart push on the side of the Justice, and it's just like, yeah, the London Spitfire have that 4.5 minute time bank, but like, who's to say that that's enough at this point? Like, that much aggression, like if you're not answering and setting the tempo like the Justice were there, like at that point, it doesn't even matter how much time you have.
Right. Washington and London are both teams that play really well when they move fast, and I think that London tried to play all of the overtime holds here really slow, which is not the maneuver. What's crazy is that in 2 crucial fights on their attack, London gets the first pick, but they do the same thing. They play so passive and so far back. They give Decay these huge open lanes, and they just don't push the cart. I mean, like, you have almost 5 minutes, 440 to get through A and B. It seems super winnable if you're London Spitfire going into this.
I mean, at this point, you would think that there's no concern, right? Like, yeah, that was a sturdy push from Washington, but like if you play the way you know how to play this game, cheeky hog hook at the beginning, but like if you play the way that you're comfortable playing, and the way we know London is comfortable playing, like this should be an absolute, just an easy W for them. It should be, in theory. Oh my goodness.
Right. And like, if you missed it right there out of the beginning, Backbone kills Assassin on the Widow. Like, they get the opening pick out of spawn. Washington's down a DPS, and Washington holds forward anyway. Just like the difference in hold position between Washington and London is what, like 30, 40 meters of cart progress? Like significant cart progress between where London set up and where Washington set up.
Yeah, oh my goodness. I don't know. Again, I think it's just bad play calling at that point, because the second you get that opening pick, especially if your team is in position to do so, you should be speeding and wrapping around the team to try and get that second or the second, third, and just team wipe, the cleanup part. I just don't think that London's focus fire is as good as some of the other teams in North America or in the rest of the league. I think they have it at times, but I do think that they tend to play a lot more, unfocused, for lack of a better way to put that. I think there's just not the same level of concentration on individual targets. Good Maywall, but again, doesn't really do anything to separate and get the first pick. Backbone's already gone. And already we're looking at this. That's 2 minutes almost eaten into the time bank. And they haven't even crossed point A because they're just not setting tempo. They're not setting tempo.
Yeah, it's kind of a mess, honestly. And it really sucks to watch. It is not fun to watch London just piddle away. I mean, again, I'm a Justice fan. I like watching the Justice win. Don't get me wrong, but I'm still critical of the Justice. They had no business winning this game because London had no business blowing this point, and they just kind of did.
I mean, what's crazy?
Go ahead.
I'm just looking at the positioning here because I can actually see it. The real crazy thing to me is London had opportunities for one or two individual picks if they weren't just all concentrated and clumped up right behind the same barrier, effectively, on that high ground. They could have rounded what am I watching right now? I'm now more livid about this than I was when I first watched it, because I'm looking at it through different goggles. But they're just they're playing scared. They've had opportunities to really isolate the Justice, and they're just not taking them. Already they're on the high ground again, and half the team's dead. This is astonishment. This is really just unfortunate. This is a throw. This is an easy throw.
Yeah,
unfortunate,
it hurts, man. And it's coming up here probably in about a minute. Sparker kills Decay, which seems like it would be the opening. And somehow London still loses. And I don't really get it. I think that it's after they cap B, because I'm pretty sure that London caps B. It's been an hour since I watched this game, and I can't remember that far back. It takes you 5 ults to get around the corner of point A. The Blizzard is good. It gets Kalios. You don't have to use too many other ults to get there. You manage to hold on to Overclock and Rampage. But this still isn't clean. And there's the Rampage coming out before you even get to point A. Finally, London gets a significant fight win and can get something going. But at this point, Jesus, you lost 4 minutes of your time bag. What happened?
Now they have to play perfectly. At this point, they have no choice but to play perfectly. They have lost every other go again attempt, because by the time they even get it to point B, they'll already be in overtime. They'll be in overtime before it rounds the corner. That's the situation they've found themselves in. It's very unfortunate.
It really is, especially when you have to dedicate somebody to cart presence, because this is not a comp that you can easily dedicate somebody to cart presence. You don't have an Ana, you don't have a Zen, you don't have a long range healer who can sit and move cart. You have to send your Lucio there, and that's such a crucial source, not only of healing, but a little bit of mobility that it hurts for the team to lose that.
Yeah, it's so true, and unfortunately, especially on this map, there's just so much verticality and so many places that you have to take position on that it's even hard to just stay. It's almost impossible to stay on cart at this point in the map, especially when you're in overtime, because you're now forced into bad position, and it's very easy for the enemy team to surround you and get on top of you, and like we just saw, clean you up real fast.
Yeah. So that's the end of map 3. Map 4 is push on Colosseo. London dominates. London just beats the snot out of Washington. Looks like they finally woken up. We can talk about it if you want to talk about it. It's a push map.
We can talk about
But
the opening fight, but it should make sense that London would dominate this map, especially with their proclivity to run the May, right? Like this is one of those instances where I would argue, if you're gonna take the risk, it's better to do it here because especially in the opening sections of this map, it's close quarters. You have a lot of space to work around, and because push is the type of game mode that it is, it sort of forces these close quarter fights, which just enables Mei to get a lot more damage. Obviously, the slow effect is helpful as well, but she just deals so much more in the Overwatch 2 patch. Like, you would think she would be picked more often, but the fact remains you do have to be in close quarters. And when Washington was talking about how they didn't know how to play around it, like eventually they figured out, oh, I'm going to stand 11 meters away instead of 10. Like,
right, yeah.
That's just kind of that's how you play around it, but you don't have that so much of that option in these close quarters maps like Colosseo. If this were on Toronto, it would be a very different story. I actually think that it probably would have gone so south for London in that case. But that's, we can only speculate on that. Otherwise,
right.
Like even this, like they're playing much more aggressively. They're able to set the pace because they're forced to by nature of the game mode. That is a cleanup on the justice as I say that, but like they're playing more aggressively, which is ultimately what they needed to do. But
yeah.
We could skip ahead to map 5. We know more or less how this plays out. There's nothing specific that makes me go, we need to cover that.
Yeah. So we switched to map 5, and you know what? Like, just to call it what it is, London gets diffed. Finally, for like a game, Washington just straight up outplays London. And, there's not really a lot of shenanigans. At one point, London panic picks Mei. You can tell, I think, after Gibraltar that London doesn't feel confident. And I've said a couple of times on the show, I don't like Colosseo. I think it's a bad map. And Washington looks really bad on Colosseo, always. Decay, specifically, looks bad on Colosseo because it's so easy for him to lose the thread and run out and try and be a hero that he just gets cut off from his team a bunch. And I'm surprised that London doesn't like pick up any more confidence out of that Colosseo push. Maybe they didn't feel good about it, but London comes into this game looking like a team who has already lost 2 maps in a row, not a team who just won one.
You know what's insane to me, just watching this back from the beginning, like I said this kind of the opposite point last week when we were talking about the Gladiators. I think the problem that the Gladiators have is the exact opposite problem that London has in this meta, and that is London plays way, way, way too close together. And I think it's a habit left over from the Rush that they play so well, but they play so clumped up that they're telegraphing every single rotation that they make. Like they're grouping up in the smallest rooms, and they have 1 or 2 places to go. And the way the Washington Justice have spread out while still gaining value from all of those radial abilities, like they are able to just surround the entirety of London, box them into these tight rooms, and then just clean them up every single time because there's nowhere for them to go. And they're literally London is outplaying themselves at this point. It's not even Washington playing well. It's London outplaying themselves.
Well, and look at ults. Like, Washington has Blade and Overclock online. London doesn't. Washington's about to get Rampage online. London isn't. Like, Washington looks good in this map, and they hadn't really looked good in 4 matches. So, I mean, it is definitely nice to see a game that I feel like ends in the favor of the team that, like, played the best out of the match, Yeah. Because I think that if you look at all 5 maps, they did. But at the same time, I had a really hard time with the end of this game. Like, Washington looked so good in this map after London looked so good all series. It's weird. It feels off. It feels different. I like your point. I think you're so right. London plays really close together. The amount of times that we see Decay off angling and doing real damage on Sojourn versus the amount of times we see Sparker off angling is really telling. You know, like typically Sparker's POV is behind Hottie, behind Admiral, behind Landon. He's still playing in that kind of the last meta's Sojourn where you're playing for picks from the back of the line, as opposed to Decay, who's treating Sojourn as like, you've got your shift jump to get back in time for commanding shout. Go take an off angle and then come back when you need healing. It's really a different Sojourn playstyle. Chat earlier said that the Sojourn diff was palpable, and I think that it's true in this map.
Oh, it absolutely. I mean, you know, people listening to the audio side of this can't see the faces that I'm making as I watch this back and really start to like focus on the positions of these teams. But I'm just like, I'm borderline kind of just disgusted by some of the things that I'm seeing, because it's like, I talked a couple weeks ago about how it's hard to tell when players are out of position unless it's like egregious. We're bordering on egregious with some of these choices. Like, oh my goodness. And that's the cleanup for Washington, and that's going to be, you know, 0.1, but my goodness.
So you would think that, right? Would you believe me if I told you that Washington gives this point back up? Oh no, sorry, that's on the second
yeah,
map.
I'm sorry. I'm like a couple seconds ahead of where you're seeing it, I think. That's
Yeah, it must be the second map. It was either the second map or maybe it was in the first control map. There's one where Washington gets it to 99, Toronto flips it and gets it, or not Toronto, London flips it and gets it to 99.
That was the last.
And then Washington flips it back.
Yeah, that was the last one, I think. Because they had, yeah, it's, oh my goodness. Here we go.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's exactly where it is. So, you're at 152. At least I just saw, I don't know where you're at in real time, but if you wouldn't mind, can you roll it back to 151 just so that we can watch Assassin die? Because sure. Assassin has the saddest death in Overwatch League.
No. Oh no.
Nope.
Oh, that I felt that. I felt that one.
Feels so bad. Feels so bad. But the reality here, I guess, just to like kind of finish the thought, is like London never really puts in a great effort on Ruins. On Well, you know, they get that point flip, and the reality is that Well is so easy to stall that they really only win one fight and get 62%. But that was a pretty dominant map from Washington. I don't feel like London had much of a chance there.
Not really.
And, you know, here's Washington at 75%, and London hasn't even touched the point yet. So it's rough, man.
Yeah, we talk about a lot about value, and it's just a lack of creating value and on the side of London. It's a lot of missed opportunities mixed with just bad play calls. Like, I think a lot of this, nothing that I'm watching, I mentioned like some egregious positioning, but that's easily fixed by just, you know, better play calling and just better rotation and better decisions. It's nothing that should be beyond the scope of the Overwatch League at this point. Oh my God, what a pick. So that's just pixels, my friend, pixels.
Dude, it's gross. Decay's a freak, man.
It hurts. And that's all she wrote for the game of the week. I don't have much more to say. Like I said, we recycle a lot of these talking points right now because there's just not much diversity in the meta, and the differences that are being made are relatively small scale unless they're absolutely egregious.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, you said it. That does it for the game of the week. You want to move on to some Preds?
Why not? Let's now that we've settled into kind of things being more predictable, let's talk about predictions, and I can fill out my bracket while we're at it.
Yeah, you sure can. Hey, let's talk about statistics from last week. So, after last week, you and I's official prediction record, I am 10-5, and you are 12-3.
Let's go.
Now, we usually ask the question at the end for our brackets of did we beat our friends' brackets? If you've listened to the show before, we have some friends we have a leaderboard with, and they know nothing about Overwatch League and tend to just do better at pick'ems than we do. Right now, Brad, I don't know if you're aware, but we are in a three-way tie,
Yup.
which is so statistically unlikely I can't handle it.
Well,
But we are in a three-way tie.
I'm super sad because there was a brief period of last night where I was leading by 1, and then somebody or both of y'all picked exact scores for that Dallas Mayhem game, and now it's tied again, so I'm real unhappy about that. But for a brief shining moment, I was leading this bracket.
Yeah, I had a really good week 3 in the East was really good for me. I only missed one game, and it was the freaking Charge Philly game, but I got all the other ones. All right, so typically we've got 5 games to talk about for us. I've got 6.
Oh, good.
Today that I want to talk through. So
Let's roll them out.
Since I know you're looking at East region, so I'll do the East region games first. Let me pull up my picks so that I don't double back on myself.
This should be fairly quick because the East is a disaster right now.
The East is a mess, and I don't know how it works. All right, Brad, on Saturday, September 3rd.
Good.
The Guangzhou Charge versus the Hangzhou Spark.
Oh god, this is gross, but I'm gonna give it to the Charge because Jimmy fucks.
Yeah, there it is, man. Jimmy fucks.
So we're gonna do the Charge. I'm gonna hop on the Jimmy bandwagon because I haven't liked what I've seen from the Spark so far, and Charge just beat Philly in an improbable fashion. I think this one could be close though because if you're not the Seoul Dynasty or the Shanghai Dragons, if you're not either of those two teams, it doesn't really matter because you could win or lose because nothing has been consistent. I'm a babbling moron because
matters.
yeah. So I'm gonna call this 3-2 for the Charge because I think it'll still be close because everything's made up and nothing matters.
Great. Well, with that in mind, on Sunday, September 4th, the Hangzhou Spark play the Philadelphia Fusion, and I have no idea what's going to happen in this game. I'll tell you that I picked Hangzhou Spark because the Fusion have upset me more recently than the Spark have. I have no faith in either of these teams.
Yeah, I don't. So here's the thing. I'm gonna go 3-0 Spark because I have lost all faith in the Fusion. I am burned. They have burned me every single map this stage. And yeah, I don't have any faith in them. I don't think they know anything. I talked at the beginning of this stage about how Belazrea and MN3 were gonna pop off and like show up to this meta, and you know what they've done? None of that. So guess what? They get a big whopping goose egg from me on this one. I don't even care if I'm wrong.
I like that. I like that a lot. I didn't ask, what was your map differential for the Charge game? Guangzhou Charge versus Hangzhou Spark.
Hold on. I had 3-2. 3-2 Charge.
3-2. All right, awesome. I'm just making sure I get it for the posterity.
Of course.
Okay, moving on to the West for our games, at least here on Spectator Diff. First one, it'll be the big game because they have to win it if they want to get into the playoffs.
Yeah.
Brad, first game of the weekend, Friday, September 2nd. LA Gladiators, Atlanta Reign.
So I had a hard time with this one. I think it's going to be close no matter what happens. I am compelled to side with the Gladiators on this. 3-2 for a couple reasons. First, I think the Happy versus Kai matchup is very, very good, but I'm leaning more towards Happy. I think he's enabled a little bit more on the Gladiators because I think the focus fire is slightly better. That being said, I think Speedily has looked excellent on the Genji. I think Vigilante has looked excellent as a pickup for Atlanta. I think they have a very solid team, and they are going to make a pretty strong showing in the tournament because they're in. I don't think there's a way that they are out of the tournament at this point. But everything's so convoluted right now, I could be wrong. I think Gladiators have a point to prove, despite most likely being out of the tournament. I think they're not going to want to leave this stage with just a dismal record. It's not going to look good no matter what happens, but I don't think they want to go out on a loss either. So I think they've looked better the past week. I like them for this match.
All right. I mean, I think all those things are fair. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to go with Atlanta here. I have Atlanta 3-1. I think Atlanta has a lot more to play for. I don't think that LA expects LA to get into this tournament. Yeah. At least if I were Face and Unter, I would not expect LA to get into this tournament. And because of the type of coach Unter is, I'm half expecting LA to like come out and run rush or like come out and run dive and just be like, hey, we're here for a good time, not a long time. What's up, nerds?
Yeah.
And Atlanta to try really hard. If Atlanta wins this game, they clinch their way into Summer Showdown. If they lose it, they're really, really on the edge. So I've got the standings pulled up. Atlanta Reign mathematically right now is sitting at 8th.
Okay.
And LA is sitting at 9th. So, you know, there's a lot on the line here. I really do think it could go either way. You can never truly count out LA. Like, if Shock looked terrible on a meta, I wouldn't count out Shock. So, you know,
I think it's gonna.
My thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's gonna rest entirely on the difference between Reiner and Hawk, because Hawk statistically has been a substantially better Junker Queen player than Reiner, and if Reiner can keep it together and LA can actually like focus fire the way that we know that they can, I can see them winning this, if only to make sure that they have the barest chance of making the tournament. But at the end of the day, I it's up in the air for me. I'm not even confident in this pick myself. Like I could see any outcome here.
For sure. All right, next game. It's one of the double points games, Saturday, September 3rd. Houston Outlaws, Washington Justice.
Oh, gross. Oh, man. I don't know. I hate this. I hate this so much. I haven't thought about this one yet. I hate this so much because on one hand, I don't have faith in the Washington Justice. But on the other hand, I really don't have faith in the Houston Outlaws. I'm going to hate myself for this. I'm going to go Justice. I'm going to go Justice 3-1. Ooh. I may change it to 3-2 later in the week, but I'm going 3-1 for right now. Here's why. I'll tell you why. Houston Outlaws have the worst ult economy in the league, period. They will blow all of their ultimates at one time and get no value and then lose the entire map. It happened a lot this past weekend. They do it all the time. Justice at least can like kind of keep it together. Borderline more faith in the Justice. This one hurts me.
Yeah. Dude, I don't know. I hate betting against my own team. I also like being right. I went Houston 3-2 in this game. My faith in Decay is waning, and that's not Decay's fault. It's just that one man can only deadlift for so long, and I just don't know that I really can expect Decay to keep it up. I think Merit and Pelican have looked really good. I don't know. I had a really hard time with this game too. I'm not confident in this pick. Washington is pretty squarely in the tournament. So, so is Houston. Neither of these teams really have a lot to like play for outside of glory and seeding. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. I really don't know.
I do want to talk briefly about the Shock Dallas game, because this one's kind of important. For the main reason, like, these are the top two teams in A right now. They have the two best records in this meta. This is the first time we've seen them matched up in this meta. They are the 2 favorites going into the actual tournament. What do you think?
I have San Francisco Shock 3-1.
Okay, that's kind of exactly where I was going to put it. Because after this weekend specifically, I think there is actually a sizable gap between Shock and the Fuel. And I think it's entirely because the Fuel rely so heavily on Hanbin.
Yeah.
There were some weaknesses that showed themselves last night against the Mayhem that are extremely exploitable. Dallas should not have dropped a map to the Mayhem. They made decisions that cost them dearly and made that match way closer than it should have been. And if Krusty is the caliber of coach that we know he is, they're going to look at that tape and they're going to go, ooh, and they're going to start just like rubbing their hands together and go, we got this. I think that's going to, and I think that also has sort of implications. This match is going to have implications for how the tournament plays out as well. So that's kind of why I wanted to talk about it briefly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Dallas have had a pretty significantly easier schedule than the Shock have.
Yeah, that's also true.
So Dallas has played LA, New York, Toronto, Boston, and Florida. Let me see how quickly I can look at what the Shock did. Shock have played Washington, Florida, Boston, LA.
Oh.
Well, I guess they played the same.
Yeah, it's
teams.
been the same. Yeah, theoretically, it
been
should be
exactly
the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, fuck what I was gonna say. I don't know. I agree with you. I think there's a pretty big difference between the Shock and Dallas. I really do. I think that Dallas is being carried by Hanbin and Sparkle because Sparkle's really good at Genji and Genji's really meta right now.
Yep.
But everybody on San Francisco looks really good in this meta. San Francisco hasn't had a lot of weak points. They've dropped some maps here and there, but they haven't dropped games. And I just don't expect Dallas to be able to break the streak. I really don't.
Yep. That's fair.
My next game of the week, I had a much harder time with on Sunday the 4th, the Toronto Defiant versus the London Spitfire.
I don't think so. I think this is going to be a Toronto 3-1. I think Toronto has looked so good in this meta, and I by comparison to how the Spitfire have just sort of been mid most of this time, I just don't think that pending something miraculous or some major change in their play style, I don't see how London, actually steps it up and beats Toronto, especially after what we just saw against the Justice, who are quite frankly a worse team. Like, it's...
Yeah.
I don't see a world in which Toronto don't actually take over. I think there's the opportunity for London to take a map. I think they're going to play the May. It'll throw off Toronto once, and that'll be that.
All right. I agree. I didn't say it, but I have Toronto 3-2. My last game of the week is I think the one that I had the hardest time with, and let me give you a little bit of setup as to why. So the last game of the weekend, the last game of the Summer Showdown tournament is going to be the NYXL and the Florida Mayhem. So NYXL and Florida Mayhem right now are tied for 10th and 11th.
Yep.
However, they have 2 games this weekend. LA only has 1 game. So the best that LA can finish is 2-4. The best that Florida and New York can finish is 3-3. Now, if Washington, Vancouver, Houston, London, or Atlanta loses, and New York or Florida win both games, they can make the tournament. Which means that for either of these teams to make the tournament, one of them has to beat each other here in this final game. Right now, they have the exact same record. Florida has won 4 maps and lost 10. New York has won 4 maps and lost 11. Their first game of the weekend that both teams play is against the Paris Eternal. So it is not unbelievable that both New York and Florida will win. And this last game will determine who makes it into the Summer Showdown. So, Brad, New York Excelsior or Florida Mayhem?
I've already filled this out, but I have it as a 5-banger, Florida 3-2, and I'll tell you why. I think that the Mayhem put up a really solid fight against Dallas and actually put them through their paces yesterday. And quite frankly, they showed up to the table with bigger, more coherent differences in the meta than we have seen thus far. I do not think New York has that kind of flexibility. I think we're going to have a couple meta matches within this game, and I think New York might pull ahead there because when Yaki plays the way Yaki can play, he dominates. But I think what New York lacks is the flexibility and the adaptation that is required to take on the Mayhem should they show up and play the way they did against Dallas.
Yeah. I don't disagree with anything that you said, except I picked New York 3-2. And I don't really have a good reason for that other than that I just think Yaki wants it more. And I want it for Yaki. And honestly, like, I like Yaki because I liked Yaki and BQB on Florida. They were a really fun duo to watch together. I enjoyed the way they played. Their team was ass and they got no glory. And so, like, Yaki on the New York Excelsior has had some really fun Genji moments. Yaki's a good Genji. I didn't watch the Florida Dallas game, and you told me that I should, so I need to watch that this week. And honestly, my opinion on this might change, but like, I have not been blown away by Florida in this meta. The wins that they've gotten have not been wins that I'm like, wow, they look really good. It's more just, they held W and the other team forgot. So I have New York 3-2 for no reason other than I want my boy Yaki to win something, and I want New York to make a playoff. But that's that.
That's totally fair. I mean, if nothing else, I like a narrative there. That's a good narrative. That's fine. One of us has to be wrong at the end of the day because otherwise something has to break this stupid tie that we've found ourselves in. So, like,
right. I
don't want it to be me, but like, if I must sacrifice myself for the good of the bracket, then I suppose I will take that L. But after, I would watch that game, and just look and see what they brought to the table because it's fascinating, if nothing else. So, I mean, all reasonable points aside. So, I think we could put a bow on this whole thing at this point.
Yeah, man, I think so too. I do just want to say, I'm not counting them out. There is a chance that Paris beats New York and Florida, in which case that last game will not matter, and that
it's
will be
true. It is very true.
Funny, TBH.
Goodness.
Kind of want Paris to win both of those games. But anyway, that will do it for this episode of Spectator Diff. Please subscribe to us here on YouTube, or if you're listening to the audio of our show, subscribe on your podcast app of choice. You can follow me on socials at MC_DJ_MC.
And me on socials at LastCall_Gaming.
And until next time, just remember, we are better at watching Overwatch than you.
GG's, everybody.